on, you bastard!
Review copies in parts provided by Blokees. Stay tuned to the end to find out how you can win some of these adorable bastards. With that said, all opinions contained within are my own and not influenced by external factors. The licensed third-party space is an incredibly difficult niche to get into, at least when it comes to the Transformers franchise. With other franchises, all you really gotta do is plonk some form of stylization on it and call it a day. But Transformers collectors, we're kinda spoiled. Especially in the current era, we're being hit with banger after banger after banger, and it's leaving a lot of people significantly pickier about what they buy. Licensed third-party often doesn't have the hindsight and knowledge on what makes a Transformer good. And even if, by some miracle, they manage to scale that wall, who's to say the fandom will gravitate towards those releases? I remember a certain company attending the Australian Transformers 1 event, and I won't mention which company it was, but not a single person really paid attention to the stall. An entire room full of fans, and nobody gave a shit. Not all third-party releases strike a chord with the fandom, licensed or no. So, why has Blokees succeeded where others have not? These things have taken the off. Bit by bit, they're crawling into every space of the community, including the hearts of those that collect them. Why is that? Why are they so popular? What's making everyone go bananas over them? Originally, I was just going to make another sponsored sample video. It's what I set out to do with all the companies I work with. However, sometimes I have more to say than I initially thought. Sometimes I think the context behind a certain release is far more interesting. But unlike the last case of this, it's for a much more positive reason this time. I'm so sorry, Cybertronians. I've caught the Blokees bug. So today's diagnosis pertains to my journey across the first few sets I've come across. Maybe in examining these, we can find out why these have succeeded where others have failed. Or maybe it'll just warm up something in my cold, dead heart. If you've been active in the fandom this past year, no doubt you've come across people going nuts over these, perhaps to an exhausting degree. I know some people have had enough hearing about them constantly, but that tends to happen when the community goes bonkers over a new thing. If, however, this is the only channel you interact with in terms of Transformers content, first, thank you. And second, Blokees are small-scale non-transforming figures that exist somewhere in a middle ground between Gunpla and Bionicle. In essence, they're model kits, but they're far less fiddly than you'd be used to. If you've ever played around with 30-minute missions, they're kinda close to that. But even then, they're a lot simpler, at least in terms of the standard randomized Blokees packs. The more complex kits are pretty much in line, though. The simplicity here is so easy that you don't really need clippers. Unlike most kits, though for the larger kits I'd still recommend using some. Normal figures usually retail from about 10 to 15 Aussie dollary dues, so some stores appear to be jacking up the price for some bizarre reason. I actually planned on covering them in the upcoming marathon, but unfortunately I ran into a rather annoying kerfuffle, where halfway through the recording, the audio cut out. I was going to record the second half, but ultimately I gave up and just swapped it out with another video instead, especially as they reached out to me for this project anyway. Now, the big thing with these is that they are randomized. You never particularly know what you're going to get in a specific box. It could be Prime, it could be Shockwave, it could be the singing voice worse than Johnny down at the pub on a Thursday night, or it could be Beast Wars Retracts. It's not Beast Wars Retracts, but it would be nice if it was Beast Wars Retracts. The best way to describe it is similar to the collectible series LEGO minifigures. You don't know exactly which one you'll receive, especially since they got rid of the plastic baggies. But if you want a specific one, the market is very much open to you. There is one key difference in release strategy, however. If you do want a specific one, you can easily buy the whole set and sell off the figures you don't want. This is a fantastic idea for figure accessibility. It guarantees you're not missing out and getting duplicates, and I love it. And hey, Transformers fans are used to buying multi-packs and selling off the figures they don't want, unless Toy Hacks makes a set that fixes the figure they dislike. Now, unfortunately, this method does mean you're out of the running for the specific chase figure, but I'm sure that's an okay sacrifice for most. Oh, right. Explanation. A chase figure is a super rare figure that's short packed to oblivion. The Japanese G1 Micromasters were filled with these sort of things, and it usually involves a metallic version of an existing design. When you buy the complete set, you're not really in the running to do so, which is a bit unfortunate, but hey, at least it's just a metallic version of a figure you can already get. It's not like those damn Hot Wheels cars that had no reason to be short-packed other than artificial scarcity or, heaven forbid, Mr. Gold. I was never able to get Mr. Gold as a kid. still mad. Hey, Dr. Lockdown from the future here. Reception actually chimed in on the pre-release version and corrected me. You can actually get the Chase version when you buy it as a set. Apparently this is what happened to Thew, so I guess I was wrong on that. After unpacking these things, most of the bits are already disassembled off the sprues. This is, of course, where the Bionicle comparisons come in. From here, it's just a simple matter of assembly. Still, I wish I had a proper step-by-step showcase on how the process works, going in depth and covering all the nuances. Hey, wait a minute. First thing you want to do is find the feet. They're exactly the same. They're identical, not mirrored. So you can use whatever you want. Just put them down to the side here. Next up, you want to take these pieces, which are the backs of the legs. And then you take these pieces, which are the ball joints, which again are also identical across all of them. And you plug it into the bottom of the foot like so. It has a nice click. What you want to do again is take the front piece, and sometimes the printing is different, so take a closer look at that. Since I'm going to be doing the right leg first, I'll do that over there. That has highway, and the other one will be patrol. Clip those together. Clip him into the feet. And same with the other leg. If you really want to keep them out of the way so that they're easier to keep track of, you can also place them on the stand. It's a nice little thing to do. It helps you get a bit more leverage on them too. There are two identical sprues, which become the shoulder assemblies, the elbows, and the knees. And the elbows and knees are both identical as well, so really you can just use whatever. The model kit builder in me is telling me to use proper clippers for this, but they are quite loose, so you can sort of just push them out. And for the purpose of this video, just to keep things a bit simple, I'm going to do that. Plus, if you happen to be building these in like a shopping center or something because you just bought them, you can also do that. Though, don't build these in a shopping center. It's sort of a disaster waiting to happen. With lost pieces and all that. And here you take the two pieces and you peg them together, and that is what you got there. And it doesn't really matter which side you clip them into, it's all basically the same. You just kind of peg it in there we go. And of course, second verse, same as the first. If you want to do all of these back to back and then just have them lying around to assemble, you can also do that too. Good news, the thigh pieces are completely identical. Again, they are not mirrored. So it doesn't matter which order you put them in, they both work either way. Waist joint, it is symmetrical, so again, it does not matter which way you put it. Now, the waist armors do get a bit different. Some of them are different from front to back, like Prowl's here, but some of them are also identical, so it really depends on which one you're getting. With this one, it's the same piece, but one has printing, one doesn't, so that's pretty self-explanatory. Also is pretty self-explanatory, just pegs in. You pull the shoulder pieces out, and peg them into either shoulder, whichever one you feel like. The front and the back pieces are pretty self-explanatory, you just kind of know what they already are. One thing that you do have to do is make sure the shoulders are lined up correctly, because they got those two pegs there that'll actually line up with the way the backpack and the chest plate work. So that when you click everything together, it should all go nice and solidly, and these ones should only get a little bit of motion instead of way too much. The shoulder pieces are identical though, so you can just pop them on however you like. Shoulder armor is sculpted identically, but the front parts are printed differently, so that's something to keep an eye on. Yours may be completely identical though, so just keep an eye on it. We'll need the joints to be made as well now for the elbows. Now, the arms are actually the one part that you do need to keep an eye on. They're the same across most figures, but you'll notice these ports on the outsides. They're actually for the accessories that they come with. So what you need to do is make sure when you go to peg it in, make sure that the hole is on the outside. That way you can ensure the full functionality of the accessories. Not the accessories are that crazy, but it's a thing that works a bit better. This sprue is for the hands. You can use whichever hand you feel like. I'm just going to use the fists because they're nice and simple. And this one will depend on the figure you get, but you'll notice there's parts on the back for different backpack pieces. In the case of Prowl, you've got door wings, that just peg on the backpack like so, and posable cannons, like so on the top on the ball joints. Come on, get in there. Ah, that is way tighter than it should be. Last but not least, everything should be very self-explanatory. You take the last ball joint and peg it into the top there, take the face sculpt and peg it in the top there. Ew, that is very creepy. And you take the helmet and it should just get on the top there. Bit squishy until it clicks into place. There we go. And you can just remove the accessories and everything else you might have. Ooh, spare ball joint. Don't know why that's there. In fully assembled form, Blokees exist in this weird grey area between properly proportioned and super deformed. For those who have not heard the word, it's an umbrella term for what many call chibi. As the Blokees style doesn't go that far, it's not enough to seem like a Nendoroid of sorts, though at the same time it doesn't quite exist in the realm of standard Transformers design. It's definitely a deliberate stylization choice, and in many instances, that can cause issues. Time and time again on this channel, I've decried the dreaded third-party syndrome, where companies only stylize for the sake of stylization, without much of a clear point. point. It's not an uncommon thing, both in the realms of licensed and unlicensed Transformer-like figures. I'm happy to report here, however, that the stylization very much does have a point, and it works very well. They've balanced it precisely so that it mixes both the cool and the cute. For as adorable as super deformed Transformers are, they're sort of an acquired taste. They're incredibly popular in Asian markets, but the wider audience can occasionally find them abominations against all that is sacred. As such, it's smart to pull back and not go all in on the cute aesthetic. Years ago, I remember this sort of middle ground being referred to as paraform, but looking it up again reveals no such results. Could be my memory being fucky-wucky, but honestly, it's hard to tell. Whatever the case, the aesthetic is calculated, and that's worked incredibly effectively as the first step in achieving fandom darling status. Of course, there are other elements that allow them to succeed within the fandom, but I feel we'll have to take a closer look at the individual figures to see what makes them tick. Without further ado,
here comes the boy.
When this wave first hit the shelves, I was sorta just buying them as extras whenever I saw them. The lineup was fairly standard, all things considered. Just a simple mugshot gallery of G1 figures, and a safe handful of bets that everyone knows and tolerates. I guess Optimus Prime is a good example of figures to lay the groundwork for everyone else, in more ways than one. One thing a lot of third-party figures struggle with is consistency in aesthetic, particularly derivative of their insistence on stylization for the sake of stylization. Not all of them fall into these trappings, but it is a smidge common. Blokees has managed to overcome this hurdle quite effectively. There's mixes of sharp angles and more rounded edges, but it's a careful balance, not a slapdash, who gives a shit case. The legs taper off to the bottom, much like the Toon design, but they're squished to fit into the semi-chibi style. The torso juts out a little bit, but not to an extreme level. The arms are a lot smaller than the legs, which gives the whole thing a downward swept vibe. And you know me, I love when figures do this. It's also surprisingly well painted for the price. There's a lot of small details on show, which puts most core class figures around the same price bracket to shame. And sure, part of that comes from assembly cost savings and no need for specialized engineering. But there's also a really interesting way they do things. Most of the details aren't actually paint, but instead tampergraphs. There is paint on the body, but it's only in really small specific places. The rest is all done with tampergraphing, even parts you'd think would be easier to do in paint. Honestly, I think this is really clever. It allows them to cover a lot of smaller details that they normally wouldn't. It also means they can reuse a lot of parts later on, but we'll save that for, ironically, later on. The head sculpt is surprisingly good. This is one part that can be really difficult to get right amongst third-party releases. Hell, even some official ones up a smidge. And sure, not every release does this well, but Prime does it rather nicely at least. Again, it's a bit more angular than you'd normally get, but it works for the overall aesthetic. Overall, it's just a nice simple Optimus Prime. It's got the cute, it's got the intensity, it's got the compactness, and it's got the expressiveness. Articulation is pretty good for the size. Anything you could reasonably expect from a model kit like this is present and accounted for, short of an ab crunch. Of course, a lot of this does come down to the fact it is a model kit, and those things can basically be as articulated as you could conceivably want. Just put extra cuts in the joints and you're basically good to go. Right Lego! Right Lego! I don't usually tend to go for non-transforming figures, simply because I just don't see much of a point in them. Why engage with that when at the same price point you can get a fully functioning figure with a whole extra mode, probably better realized aesthetics, and most likely the same level of articulation? I think since messing around with this, I've come to realize what they've been missing. An experience unique to their niche. Blokees inhabit a style that just doesn't work within the confines of traditional engineering. These recognize that they don't transform and lean into it. Sure, I've covered products that do the same on this channel before, but not in this carefully calculated way. And it's not just a Mo accuracy thing either. Mainline is plenty accurate, and just making it even more so doesn't necessarily do anything for me. They inhabit their own space, and they do so incredibly well. Of course, uniqueness aside, how are they able to remain in the sub $15 price brackets? While there are plenty of savings to be made from the lack of assembly costs and the careful calculations of using tampergraphs instead of paints, that doesn't account for other factors like the licensing fees. I mean, other companies make figures roughly the same size and charge commander price for 2 of them and a piece of cardboard backing. Well, the answer to that is retool power. If you actually look between the various figures that released in the first wave, or at the lineup in general, a lot of the same parts are shared between figures. Every Blokee, is the singular Blokee or something else, features the same feet, the same thighs, the same waist assembly, the same waist armor, the same inner torso, the same shoulder assembly pieces, the same forearms. The only differences are the colors and tampografs. And that's ignoring the internal skeletal pieces, which obviously wouldn't make any sense to change. And then you see everything else in this wave, and you realize that the similarities go even deeper than that. These are the lads I got out of this assortment, and all of them go even further with identical shoulder pieces. Then, in the case of the Datsuns, you also get identical torso and backpack parts. And then Jazz takes that even further, though obviously he has different shoulder accessories and the addition of extra wheel arches on the legs. This is really smart. Reusing the same parts over and over again allows them to keep the cost down without having to worry about ruining individuality. With different tampografs, they all end up feeling vastly different, even if structurally they really aren't. It also allows you to go either toon or toy style with Jazz on the door wings, which I think is a really neat unintended side effect. Side note, the tampografs on the doors are especially lovely, in all the cases across both waves. Of course, reusing bits means they all get the same accessories. Each figure comes with open and closed handsets, though I've never really bothered with the open ones. Outside of a poor attempt at a JoJo pose, they've never done much for me. They also come with faction symbols that you can plonk on the sides, which is why they have the holes here. They're sort of interchangeable, so any can fit in any way. Other than that, they all come with different guns and sometimes blast effects. They get the job done, nothing too crazy here. Other than that, what can I say? They're done really well. So, what's there to complain about? Well, couple of things. I've especially noticed with the first waves that the unmasked faces look off. Prime and Jazz get away with it, but something about the squinted eye and Skylar white yo face combo just doesn't really work on the others. Maybe bigger helmets could have rectified it, but they're not the worst third-party face sculpts I've ever come across. Worse though is the choice of some of the hardware. 3 of the inner ball joints on each and every one of them are cast in clear plastic. Clear plastic load-bearing joints are never a good idea, and so far I still haven't seen them move away from these. Still though, far from a deal breaker. They're all nice little core-scaled figures hovering around the same price bracket, so forgive me if I don't give you the dimensions for each figure I'm talking about. Either way, through all the factors I've listed here, they had me hooked. As such, there was no way the journey was gonna stop there. Unfortunately, I never really got to see Wave 2 hit Aussie shelves, but if I ever feel so inclined, I can go back and scour eBay for the ones I've missed. Literally the day I finished filming this review, they were just there, at King's Comics. Definitely jumped the f*** on Wave 3 though, and I'm so happy I did. Wasn't able to get many before they flew off the shelves, but what I got really does shake things up a bit. Armorless Magnusless weirdly fits in a way I wasn't expecting. Often doing figures entirely in a single color can be quite dull, but this really makes it work with the coloration used. The extra paint on the leg vents break things up just enough, and I adore the turquoise splotched around everywhere. And those windows, damn, they are just something else. I don't know what this new head layout is doing, but god, the turquoise mouthpiece looks great. And I also adore the way the axe turned out, making full use of the tampographic techniques. Functionally, it's not that much different from Optimus Prime outside of the different accessories, but it just gives it a whole new vibe. Maybe it's because I'm so over G1 Optimus Primes, especially in the face of some of the best we've had in ages. But this weirdly seems more up my alley. It's simple, but very effective. Nothing simple about Soundwave, however. This goes insanely hard. There are tampografs everywhere, and a bunch of specialized pieces to help facilitate them. The legs especially, with all their layering and downward swept motion. This is how I like my sound waves, and this is right up my alley. The only part I'm not so certain on is the way the torso functions. Having the printed cassette there feels a little off, especially as it opens to reveal another cassette on the inside, one that's died a horrible death. But other than that, and other than the lack of paint on the Gatling gun, because heaven forbid it ever be as illing as Dreadwing, it's a pretty good release. It does have a bit of overlap with the Iron Factory version, so I don't hold as much affinity for it as I probably should, but it's done insanely well. I'll tell you what does curry my affinity though. Bone Crusher. This thing looks absolutely mental, using so many unique parts to pull it off. It feels like its own specially sculpted release, taking what came before but building on it to a ridiculous level. They finally managed to fix the face sculpt on the unmasked bots too, which is fantastic. I adore the way they've done the tread legs. Since they don't have to transform, they can really do whatever the f they want. This trapezoidal system really fits into the Blokees stylings, melding perfectly with the existing calves. And to avoid the whole thing of becoming an endless waft of green, which unfortunately seems to be the fate of the Studio Series version, they've even done the internal frame pieces in purple. Still using those clear feed balls though, which is a bit of a shame. I will say, I do find it funny that they allow the front scoop to fold down, revealing specialized detail that wasn't visible before. Like, okay, cool, but why? It makes me wonder if there's a way to disassemble them and combine the whole thing into a giant giant Devastator. No matter how much I search, I can't seem to find any evidence of such outside of fan combinations. For real though, a Blokees Devastator would go hard. You can see from this wave that they're starting to become a lot more experimental with their new pieces and techniques. They're still the same old Blokees at their core, but they take more risks, do more specified things with each outing. One thing I'll always appreciate companies doing is avoiding stagnation, trying to move forward and improve in any way they can. And that would continue even further with the next wave. This was where Blokees basically stepped in and offered me the entire wave as a sponsored sample. I would have said yes regardless, but at this point I already had the Blokees bug and had already sold my soul for the eventual Blokees. Honk. I'm not an egg, I swear. The Constructicons continue to be great, giving us both Hook and Scrapper. All of the awesome specialized molding comes back, with even better tamper graphing to pick out the lovely details. If these actually transformed, they'd probably be my favorite Constructicons ever. I think I might hunt down the rest anyway if it doesn't end up being too difficult. I especially love the dedicated leg detailing. They're crafted carefully and work really well at creating the illusion of depth. Blokees has realized they can go ham on the tamper graphing without causing too many issues with the budgets. Probably because these things are way more popular than that one time I made a meme in 2 seconds. Why is this the most watched video on my channel of all time? Why can't it be one of these instead? The face sculpts continue to go hard, especially Scrapper. Although they've since solved the issues with the wonky sculpts, masked heads still go harder. How to make the rules, they just do. I also love how the midriffs push through the sculpted torso detailing. They're not something you'd normally notice, but they make good use of the standardized frame. I don't know, it's nice to see a stylized take on the Constructicons that move away from the G1 design while still doing it competently. Or at least competently and not produced by the spawn of Satan. Really, I just wish they'd carried over the purple joints from Bone Crusher. I know they're not as necessary on these two as they're not comprised entirely of green, but it would be a nice addition. Of course, not everything within the wave was a complete overhaul. Straight redecos keep the cost of the whole wave down, and with this we have Blue Streak and Nemesis Prime. I don't have a lot to say about Blue Streak other than the tamper graphing still being awesome and the face still staring into the abyss within your soul. But Nemesis Prime... okay, as a figure on his own, not much to him. I appreciate that they upped the turquoise level, as that's usually how I like my Nemes. And the window tamper graphing is still really good. But honestly, the accessories are my favorites. They echo a lot of that Power of the Prime style, which themselves were a throwback to the original Armada Prime. Here, however, they're massive compared to everything else. I don't know if they specifically fit the vibe of the figure itself, but hot damn, they look good. Also nice that they finally make use of the armholes instead of the dinky old badges minus the mushroom, because I don't do drugs. But yeah, between the turquoise and the weapons, this is probably my favorite of the 3 Primalikes. It's honestly refreshing to see a company go for the 3 easy releases, yet make them all unique and distinct. They don't feel like the same experience, they all offer something different. I like it. I like it a lot. Not so sure I'm sold on Shockwave though. Surprisingly, he has some decent new tooling with new shoulders, new shins, and new heads, and all the other stuff you'd expect like the torso, backpack head, etc. I don't think it really works though. The shoulders feel way out of place when compared to everything else. They just look way too thin for the design. The shins work, but the head sculpt kinda doesn't. The ear spikes jut so far out, feeling like they're trying to go for the Fans Project Crossfire style, where it's extra elongated, but with how far out the ears are, I don't think it succeeds. And I'm sorry, the torso just looks cheap. Honestly feels like a sticker slapped on, which falls very short of the standard they've set for the other figures. Maybe they were just scaling back the focus from this figure, putting the majority of effort into the chunky boys. Tarn and Ultra Magnus really pushed the limits of what's possible under the traditional torso assembly. They're basically not even using the original ball joints anymore. They're incorporating dedicated wider ones that make them feel a lot bigger. I don't know if it works that well on Ultra Magnus though. He feels a bit wide for my taste. It doesn't feel like this was designed for these specific proportions. I can accept something like SS86 because it's designed around those wider shoulders. The standard Blokees system isn't, and combined with a somewhat bland shins, it's not really doing anything for me. Also not feeling the torso tampos, not quite as bland as Shockwave, but in the same ballpark. Tarn though, this is some good shit. They use that trick where they elongate the knee pads to make the shins feel a lot longer than they actually are. It's a technique I've seen used on Iron Factory Optimus Prime specifically. It's subtle, but it works rather well. The torso is to die for, really nailing the bruiser feeling. It's halfway between MMC's and Iron Factory's takes, which works well with the Blokees semi-chibi modus operandi. Combined with some really cool layering effects as well as some actual paintwork instead of simple tamper graphs, you can tell this one's the main focus of the wave. And honestly, absolutely fair. Tarn is a novel character. Until recently, we never really thought he would get a toy at all. And now we have multiple, which is pretty funny. Is he my favorite of the wave? I'd say the Constructicons take the cake for me. But he's still quite good. My only gripe is how dinky the gun looks, but at this size, that's not really an issue. If I had to rank the Tarns in my collection, it would probably go Legacy, then MMC, then Blokees, then Iron Factory, then Legacy Cyberverse, though I've since fixed that one with Toy Hacks. He's not the best Tarn I've ever come across, but he is very good. And I really hope they experiment with the format more. In this format, that is. We'll get to Classics class later. That's not the only case of going above and beyond, though, because we still have the Wave's darling, the tiny Snart. Initially, I thought this was a case where you had one release that could be built as either the dinosaur or robot mode, but no, these are supposed to be separate figures. Within the Blokees micro-fandom, people have been going nuts over these, and I can see why. They're bloody adorable. The robot mode a little less so, it's decent for what it is, but I don't particularly get anything from it. Maybe because Snarl in general isn't a Dinobot I go nuts for outside of the amazing 86 version. Just something about the face and the proportions and the hollow backpack make it all fall a little flat for me. It's not a bad figure by any stretch of the imagination, but I've seen a lot of amazing shit from Blokees by now, and this doesn't really make me feel the same. But the dinosaur mode, well, it's not the best of the Wave, but I fuck with this a lot more. It's really intricate in its assembly, turning the whole standard on its head and being an adventure in itself. Any of the parts are shared across the two of them, but they're used in completely different ways. It's not enough to make me want to get all of them, but it's enough to see that they can take a base and use it to reach new heights of reassembly creativity. And I think that's the big thing I got from this Wave, more so than the previous ones I both have and haven't come across. They've been experimenting with the limits of the systems they've put in place. And I don't think they've reached those limits. There's a metric ton they can do, a metric ton they can achieve. And of course, this is all within the Galaxy class price point. They can still keep it at the current weight while still pushing the envelope and doing crazy creative things. Now I know the next order of business is the Transformers 1 stuff, but I do really hope they come back to this unified style and give some more obscure characters the chance to shine. And that's where I thought I'd leave this video. This is all I believed I would need to cover. I could reach my conclusions, put out a nice short sponsored sample like I usually do, and call it a done deal. But they, kinda went above and beyond. I might have been given a few extra things than I initially anticipated.
Let them come.
This right here is what's referred to as Classic Class. These are an extension of the traditional Blokees building system, with primarily specialized pieces and more heroic proportions. They still use the standard torso piece, but even that comes with LEDs to up the premium feel of the price points. LEDs nuts. Lamau, got him! I do think that the names of the two price points probably should have been switched, but it's all just product in the end, so it doesn't really matter. One of their first releases was a take on Rise of the Beasts Optimus Prime. In fact, it would seem the majority of their ROTB lineup was done this way. The best way to describe it is the 30-minute missions of the Blokees line. The assembly is very similar, only a bit more layered to fine-tune the movieverse aesthetic with all of its panels on panels on panels. It's an easy enough build that doesn't go balls to the walls, but it doesn't particularly need to. The end result is a little lankier than the other Blokees, but it's a very nice balance between the two defined aesthetics. I think I might actually prefer it to the studio series Voyager, probably partially because that thing disappoints to no end in its vehicle mode. Seriously, if you're gonna f up the vehicle mode that poorly and say it's better because of the accuracy, you might as well just make an Action Master. Oh wait. I absolutely love the way the detailing is done. It's very cuboid, but it layers itself very well. If anything, it's probably better defined than the movie itself, which, to be honest, was a great big slab of nothing. The head sculpt is pretty neat, even though it's pretty easy to get this head sculpt to look good. The LED effects are quite nice, only requiring you to shake the thing for a bit to activate them. Would have preferred a simple switch, but they probably wanted to have the back as clean and well-toned as a femboy confidant. It's probably the only part that's a bit simple overall. The rest has truly divine layering effects. I mean, look at these legs, they're amazing, and yet they're only a few carefully placed pieces in the grand scheme of things. Then you get the articulation into the mix, which is the same and as good as the Galaxy class figures, and he truly comes alive. See, the thing about sculpt work is that it usually accentuates posing. You ever come across a figure that technically has a lot of great articulation, but it just seems to fall flat? Well, that's kind of the reason why. And it also goes the other way, with a figure that has limited articulation being elevated by immaculate sculpt work. This Prime is both, and the end result is very nice. There's not a lot I can really fault this Prime with. It's well sculpted, well built, well articulated, pretty much everything you could want. If I had to take any issues, really it's just three things. The Matrix cavity is a bit silly, and it could have used a clear insert to make better use of it, but that's something that can be easily ignored. Not like you had a Matrix in the movie anyway. Wrong MacGuffin. Secondly, the colors are a bit off. The blue just feels a bit too pastel for my liking, but it's easy enough to ignore. And thirdly, the shoulder armor likes to fall off, but that's a really easy fix with some glue. Just gonna wait until after the video's done and go to town. Other than that though, yeah, I don't have a lot to say. It's probably my favorite interpretation of the character design. Maybe not my favorite toy, but the things it does to the screen model just work for me. Also, massive positive, it helps me calm down after a panic attack. So it's got a really warm place in my heart.
If you want a boxer, I will step into the ring for you.
I've got to admit, I've never been the biggest fan of the 07 Megatron design. It always seemed a bit chaotic and messy to me. It didn't have the clear theming the other bots and cons from the same film embodied. Maybe it's because I was never really exposed to the design as a child, as I never got any of the figures. In my defense, they didn't look very good. Or maybe it's because my primary introduction was the DS games, where he looked closer to a crack dealer in a back alley. Really should probably replay those games someday. I did greatly enjoy the Studio Series outing, but that one took a few liberties by virtue of being a retool, particularly in the torso and legs. In its standard form, it's just not a design that I get that excited for, and not one I've actively sought out representation of in toy form. As such, Blokees 07 Megatron isn't a figure that usually would have gotten me excited, but oh boy am I glad I got a chance to try him. The new 2007 range of Blokees figures is like the previous classic class on steroids. You can't even tell the original torso is in there, it's metamorphized so extensively that it feels completely different. In fact, it basically has the original proportions of the screen model, save for a slightly bigger head. This does mean that it loses the Blokees stylization, the vibe that made the company so popular in the first place, but I don't really know how it would work for this character design anyway. Prime maybe, but definitely not Megatron. Of course, you can't do a figure like this without some level of stylization. This isn't supposed to be a picture-perfect representation of the screen model, so something has to change. And my god, it was so simple I should have realized it earlier. Make the inner frame gold! The entire robot is a beautiful blend of metallic twin shades. It's so obvious that these colors go together, but me, these go so well together. Now, looking back at the screen model, there are inner bits that are gold, but they're very subtle and you'd miss them if you blinked. This is where a lot of those highlights on the movie masterpiece come from, but on this outing, it's much more pronounced. It's an easy aesthetic quirk to forget. I mean, I didn't even realize as I'm so used to the toys relying on gunmetal instead. Combined with the already great layering assembly, it leans into the Bayverse alien style incredibly well. Then you bring back the Blokees big leg format, which as said earlier is an aesthetic I always adore, and they turn Megatron from a chaotic mess into a resplendent regent. They essentially drape this perfect balance of aesthetic choices over an already great articulated base, and you end up with something way better than it has any right to be. They haven't been 100% faithful, but the changes they've made are purposeful and finely crafted. These guys have way more respect for the original animation model than I would. I mean, if I was making a toy like this, I doubt I would have bothered with hiding the Allspark in the chest. Shame the torso lights are buggered on my copy though. They worked a grand total of once and then ceased completely. At least the eyes still light up, so you can feel the full force of his constipation. Seriously, am I the only one who sees it in his head sculpt? He's like Ivan Ooze after a night of all-you-can-eat sushi. Two restaurant terms that should never come together. I'm not going to pretend this is my favorite Megatron design, especially in the face of other more fully realized takes. If Blokees were ever to do these, I might actually go for them instead of being content to try the samples out at random. I do have to acknowledge one key thing though. They took one I don't normally care about and turned it into something I'm actually glad to see. Especially in the photography. This does things that I normally wouldn't feel from an 07 Megatron design. Of course, that's all well and good, but there's no way you could beat the true pinnacle of Blokees releases. 2007 Optimus Prime, to me, is an undeniable classic. I mean, how could it not be? The 2007 movie was the primary introduction into the franchise for many, including myself. Over the years, I've always wanted the perfect representation of the character. The 2009 leader class outing was enough for me as a kid, but as I grow older, I've always wanted one that built something new from the ground up and offered something that truly captured his presence on screen. That was partially why I never really gelled with Wei-Jang Thunder Leader. Although in all honesty, that was one of the least applicable reasons in the face of abysmal materials, nightmarish conversion, and anything else designated a side effect of the company's absurd hubris. And sure, the original 07 leader was more in line with the simplicity and engineering I was desiring, but it didn't really occupy the space I was hoping for. Studio Series was the same, a fantastic release that I feel doesn't get enough credit, but still just a standard Voyager/leader, depending on which version you got. They were fantastic, but not what I was looking for. I never expected a non-transforming figure to fill a hole in my collecting desires, even for just the time being. I did want this outing before I was given it for free, but I never expected to be blown away like this. Blokees 2007 Prime is unmistakably the best release of theirs I've come across. It's been a damn long time since I've connected this much with an Optimus Prime figure, 2007 or no. Again, it's just sort of the screen model with a slightly bigger head, but they've put the most care into this I've seen of anything of theirs I've come across so far. The head sculpt is right on the money. It misses some of the paint applications, but it manages to cover all the bases and still deliver the stoicism Prime is known for. It's sort of similar to Studio Series in that regard, though it easily trumps that figure in its torso. The layering effect reaches its ingenuity peak here, with the windows bobbing and weaving around the other plastic pieces. You can't even tell the Blokees torso is in there anymore, save for the glowing torso. No matrix of leadership this time, but like, is that even necessary? In general, the layering on this thing is immaculate. It seriously looks like he's stepped off the screen, with the only major difference being he applied the big head cheat from Bionicle Heroes DS. A lot of DS references in this video, swear it wasn't intentional. There are some parts that are a smidge simplified, such as the arms with their sticky outy bits, but you can't deny they've gone above and beyond in every area. I mean, take a look at the back. How many figures, transforming or no, just give up on this point? They even put a trailer hitch in there. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but either way, it's an insane detail. And the crazy thing is, it's relatively simple to build. This didn't take 1 billion pieces and 3 days to put together. It's smart in its assembly, making clever use of sprue space. It's a bit bigger than Legends at this point, but it very much embodies the simplicity first mantra, only in its build instead of its non-existent transformation. Then you bring in the tamper graphing and he just soars. It may not have the pinstriping, but that's so minor considering this guy barely cracks deluxe price. Their strategic positioning around the design really elevates everything. It again feels way more premium than the price point would normally deliver. The perfect blending of color and sculpting is exceptional, and when brought to life with the same old posing, there he is. There 2007 Optimus Prime is. I realize a lot of this comes down to my nostalgic bias, but seriously, I don't have much negative to say with this. It's clear that from every angle they've made sure that the design is carried across with care. Really, my only gripe is one of the same issues I had with the Rise of the Beast version, the wheels. They try to differentiate them with a different gunmetal, but it just doesn't work. They look a bit bland in comparison to everything else on the design, but other than that, it's Christmas. Look, I'ma be honest, this is the reason I turned this into a full video. I could have just done a simple product showcase and called it a day, even if I liked the product a lot, which I often really do. But in this instance, it didn't just connect with me, it inspired me to write about it. Above all else, Blokees has captured the feel of the character, more so than any other third party I've seen recently attempt such. It's what I've been craving for a very long time, a version that captures the essence of 07 Prime. For that reason, I find myself preferring the Magnificent Mecha version of the character to the Unique Toys one, despite the fact Unique Toys is infinitely more accurate. Magnificent Mecha feels like 2007 Prime, and Blokees does too. It's not an easy thing to pull off. Companies have tried and failed constantly through figures, statues, and even subscriptions. And yet, here we are. And I gotta say, that's pretty commendable. So it's pretty clear they know what they're doing with their figures, but that doesn't explain their success. For all the gushing I have to go on with them, it really boils down to a few factors. Number 1, filling the void potentially left by core class. Whether the price point is ending or not, I'm not sure, but I do know one thing. At the very least, it's winding down. We're seeing fewer and fewer releases as these spawns of Satan slowly but surely take their place. People want cheap and simple desk toys to mess with, and although these don't transform, even at their most complex, they fill that void with simple build processes. At most, you're taking half an hour. You can do these in your lunch break, so they're desirable. They also fill the collectability aspect of Legends figures. You want to get all of them and have a massive army in front of you. Blokees goes places Hasbro isn't particularly wholehearted in at the moment, and people are noticing. Secondly, clear aesthetic choice. Unlike many examples, these aren't just adding stylization for the sake of stylization. They're specifically choosing a middle ground between standard proportions and super deformed adorability, so that a wider audience can engage with them. The line work is all consistent, and everything sweeps downward with visual interest. When you buy a Blokees figure, you know what you're getting into. It's no roll of the dice whether it's going to be a genuinely brilliant experience or just a stand-in until a better one comes around. And thirdly, just overall quality. You can have a toy that's in the right place and at the right time to create a subcultural phenomenon, but if it's a piece of shit, what's the point? I'm not going to say all Blokees figures are fantastic. There are some that fall below the par, but most of the time, they go hard, and when that happens, you know you're in for a real treat. I'm not sure who's behind Blokees, but it's clear they know what they're doing, and their endearment within the community is well deserved. Of course, the question remains, what now? Where do they go from here? Well, they're delving into Transformers 1 is a fantastic start. I'm actually considering grabbing a few of them and expanding— What the f***? I don't know what happened, but midway through the whole video production, they just sent me another package. I genuinely thought this was the incoming funhole thing I'm supposed to get, but apparently not. Anyway, these might seem like your old standard film tie-ins, but there's one thing to remember: the cogless bots are actually reasonably in scale with the standard deluxes from both Studio Series and Mainline. As such, it's a guaranteed recipe for success right there. I don't know if I'll do another full review on these, but definitely expect a sponsored showcase in the new year covering them. Now, if they were to take my advice, they'd expand this to Action Masters and Pretenders, because right now there's no truly accurate and genuinely good updates. I said truly accurate. And I said genuinely good. You can't have both. They also seem to be moving closer to the chibi style of things, with some cheaper outings. I'm not sure how well this will sell outside of Asia. Memories of Q Transformers shell-forming at anime conventions for years comes to mind. I'm sure they know what they're doing though, and whatever they do next will also be spectacular. They've already gotten over the first hurdle, actually breaking into the licensed third-party market. Now that they've carved out a niche, the next big question remains: how will they take things to even further heights? But that's a question for another time, so as always, fandom public consciousness is a conversation, so drop your thoughts on the Blokees line below. Have these caught your eye on store shelves? Have you not been interested in the slightest? Who would you like them to make next? Big thanks once again to Blokees for providing the bulk of these as review samples. Stay tuned for about 10 more seconds to find out how you can win some of these for yourself. And as always, remember, there's a context for everything. Till next time! Do you like Blokees? Do you like Transformers 1? Who am I kidding? Everyone and their mother likes Transformers 1 because it's genuinely great. But if you've enjoyed what you've seen, here's how you can win your own Blokees prize packs. There's a massive pool of prizes for this. 3 full sets of the Transformers 1 Galaxy class lineup, 2 Classics class Optimus Primes, 2 Megatrons, 2 Elitas, and 2 Sentinel Primes. All that's required is some simple reposts on the various social medias provided in the link below. Check the description or the pinned comment and it'll provide instructions on how you can enter. By reposting through the link and tagging your friends, you can maximize your entry counts for up to, I don't actually know how many entries you can get. I'm not very good at maths. This shit is very confusing. Entries close on the 5th of December. Not sure which time zone. Better get your entries in quick. Anyway, once again, big thanks to Blokees for providing me with this opportunity. I'll probably be back next month because I'm already buzzing with script ideas. Lamau. Anyway, catch you next time. Bye, motherfucker!